This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist. Because we're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/stopthestigma for their first ever State of Stigma report, the latest in mental health research.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Wellness Coach on Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Edie Summers, and I have yet another really special guest and show for you today. We're going to be talking about how to survive and the extraordinary resilience of ordinary people. Andy Steiner's latest book, How to Survive, The Extraordinary Resilience of Ordinary People, was released in this January of 2015 by Think Peace Publishing. In this book, dozens of people who've lived through tough times share the unique ways they've weathered trauma to continue to live a meaningful life. And he tells these everyday survivor stories in a journalistic reporting style, mixed with her own unique perspective. Here's some praise for How to Survive. I found much to admire about this book, which will be a valuable resource for people navigating their way through struggle. That's by Dan Buettner. Also, Andy Steiner has accomplished something special in How to Survive, the Extraordinary Resilience of Ordinary People. The book not only offers an anthology of inspiring recovery stories, but also resources and insights from those working in emotional wellness. It's a wonderful guidebook on how to get through difficult times. That review is by Chris Matza. And the central thesis of the book is to help the reader learn, as Andy did, the sense of confidence that one holds the inner strength needed to survive trauma. It is filled with practical wisdom and is a powerful and emotional book. And I see Andy on the line here. I'm going to welcome her into the studio in just a moment. I just wanted to introduce her first. Andy Steiner is an award-winning journalist, editor, and freelance writer. Her articles have appeared in many national and regional publications, including Minnesota Monthly, Minneapolis Star Tribune, Every Day with Rachel Ray, Utna Reader, Ms., Glamour, Mademoiselle, Self, Modern Maturity, and the Toronto Sun. She currently is the mental health and addiction reporter for MinnPost, and her recent pieces can be found there, or actually on her website, andysteiner.com. Her most recent book is How to Survive, The Extraordinary Resilience of Ordinary People. It was released in January of 2015, again by Think Peace Publishing. I'll be talking a little about them as well. Think Peace Publishing, just so you know, specializes in resiliency stories and also health advocacy. So they actually contacted me to conduct this interview, and I'm so grateful to Adam with Think Peace Publishing for reaching out to me. Andy wrote the Feeding Your Baby chapter for Our Bodies, Ourselves, Pregnancy and Birth, which was published by Simon & Schuster in 2008, and contributed to the best-selling parenting anthology Blindsided by a Diaper by Three Rivers Press. She is also author of 2 children's books, A Sporting Chance, Sports and Gender, and Girl Power on the Playing Field, a book about girls, their goals, and their struggles. There's so much more to talk about with Andy, but I'm just going to welcome her into the studio right now, and we'll go ahead and talk about how to survive and how to become resilient in the face of trauma and move beyond being a victim. So, Andy, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks a lot for inviting me on the show.
Oh my goodness, it's my pleasure, and I do have to thank Adam for letting me know about you. And your book is it's such an amazing resource, and that's one of the many things I love about your book is not only is it a gorgeous book with a gorgeous cover, but you actually have resources in here for people that have gone through different types of traumas kind of built into the book, which I really love. So it's very practical. I was wondering if you could share with us kind of like the overall theme of how can people survive and move beyond trauma and experience resilience. What is the overarching theme of your book for our listeners today, Andy?
My book really, I was really interested in the stories of people who'd been through traumatic life events, because I realized at some point in my life that everyone really has challenges. And what I was amazed by as a reporter, just talking to people who'd been through different sorts of things, because that's the sort of stories that people often write about, I saw a unifying theme is that people have inside themselves amazing parts that are actually stores of resilience that they don't know about, and that everybody really has the ability to survive. The how-to element, there are different ways that people manage to get through very hard things in their lives. One of the main themes is often people finding community in different ways. Another is people finding spiritual help. A lot of different people do that. Other people write about what their problems are. And other people just, in a very old-fashioned way, I guess, just keep on living, no matter what it is. They just keep going. So there you go. There's some examples, but there's many more.
Wow. And you have some really great examples in your book, and I actually got chills when you said the last one. They just keep on living. It's kind of like that finding that place inside of you that is resilient, and also focusing on your strengths. I know you talk about, I think it's toward the beginning of the book, how there was a social worker who was kind of a little bit frustrated with her profession, right? Because it was so based on the tactics were based on kind of like what's going wrong in people's lives, and then she found out about resiliency training and how you can focus on strengths instead, and which can be really great for people. And also you do mention the power of community. I see that as being an overarching theme in your book as well, that when people realize that they're not alone and that they can find support, whether it's online or in person, or begin to create their own support by asking for help, then that's a huge part of it as well, isn't it? I'm wondering if you could share a story or two that are around some of the ways that people that can become more resilient.
Right. Well, a lot of times I think people, when they're in the midst of a trauma, at first they feel like they're alone. They have no idea what's going on. I can talk about in my own life when I was a much younger person, and it was something that felt like a big deal, but ended up not really being that big a deal. But at the moment, it felt like a big deal, and I was feeling sick, and I had to go to an urgent care center. And I write about this in the book, and I just remember feeling like I'm in the worst situation. I'm the only person, and I looked around, and I felt like the lowest point in my life. And a nurse just happened to walk by, and she touched me on the shoulder, and she said something like, "Welcome to the ranks of the walking wounded. If you look around, we're all around here." And I remember feeling so, at first I felt kind of weird, but then something about looking around and seeing all the different kinds of people and how everyone there, they all look different, all different kinds of situations. We all were there, and we all were experiencing something, and somehow it made me feel better, like I wasn't so alone. So that's my own personal example, but I can talk about examples in my book. Say, for instance, here's an example. I write a chapter about how to survive the death of a spouse. So my chapters are broken up on how to survive different traumas. In that chapter, there's a young woman who, Stacy, her name is, and when she found out at a young age, her husband, they got engaged and married very quickly. He was feeling not so great before their honeymoon, but before their marriage, they got married. He went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Come back to me after the honeymoon. We're not sure." We ran some tests. By the time when they got back from the honeymoon, they found out that he actually had pancreatic cancer, which is, most people know, is a tough diagnosis. So, and it turned out that he lived, Stacy's husband, John, lived for 2 more years, which is a long time with pancreatic cancer. But she was so after she got over the initial shock and dismay, she didn't know what to do. She went out looking for support groups. She felt like she didn't find a support group that worked for her because most people with pancreatic cancer aren't in their 30s like John was. They're usually older. And so she decided, she didn't know what to do. So she decided, I'm going to write about this, and I'm going to just try blogging. She hadn't blogged before. She just started a blog, and she just kind of sent it out into the world, had no sense of, did no optimization, did nothing. She had no sense if anyone would ever hear her. And it was really within a matter of days, I believe, she got responses. Somebody responded to her, and it was just like she was blown away. Somebody was out there, and she started blogging and really created a community. I mean, and after her husband's death, she continued to blog as just being a young widow and made a lot of friends, so to speak, virtually, and I think they ultimately met up with people too. It was something that really changed her life. Also in that chapter, not to go on too long, but there's a man I talked to whose wife died he was married for I think almost 50 years, a long time, and his wife died of lung cancer. Afterwards, he really didn't feel like he had good organizations for widowers, because usually husbands die before their wives. You tend to be more widows than widowers. He needed to find someone. He went out and he asked around, and he got a couple names of people, and he just went out and started meeting people, calling them up and saying, "Can I talk? Let's go have dinner." And they'd talk and have these wonderful conversations, and he started an organization called the National Widowers Organization, which still exists. It's based online, but it's a great organization for widowers and providing specific support for the kind of things that men need in their grieving process. So,
which can be different. I know that that men can grieve differently than women can. Isn't that true, or isn't it? Or I know that somewhere in your book you talk about is that the section where you talk about that? Like there are different gender differences, and is it for grieving or is it for?
Well, there's different areas. I think I do talk about that in grieving, though. I mean, that is something that they've really found in that organization, that men needed to talk about it in a different way. When this man's wife was dying, she said to him, just don't take too many casseroles. I don't want the casserole brigade coming by your house. I want you to make some friendships. I want you, and he did. And he made these friendships and talked to men in a way that men, it's a different kind of support and a different way of communicating. It just worked better for him. So.
And I remember that first story that you mentioned about the young widow and her husband who got sick, and then first of all that was so profound to read that, and then also I think I remember this correctly, that when she did initially start reaching out and she got a response, she wasn't sure how to take it at first, but then she just decided to embrace it, right? Isn't that part of it is it is new territory, whether you're grieving or it's new, it's all new territory, so there's
it's
sort of
like
being open.
Oh, here's another story. And I read a chapter about how to survive the death of a child. In that chapter, there's a woman who is the executive director of a group called Compassionate Friends. Compassionate Friends is an organization for parents who've lost children. I mean, it's a very difficult, it's a hard thing to imagine. When she was in a car accident when she had a son and a daughter. They were young. She was in a car accident. Both her son and her daughter were killed in that accident. It's horrible. And she really felt that she couldn't do it. I mean, it was just for her, it was like she didn't know what to do. All she could do was lay on the ground and cry. I mean, it was for a long time. Someone came to her and her husband and said, there's this organization called Compassionate Friends. This is before she became executive director, obviously. And she resisted it. She didn't want to talk about it. She didn't think she could ever do that. But she finally decided, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go. So she went with her husband, and at first it was just too painful. But then suddenly she realized in talking to people that there's a woman, this woman was talking about her experience and how she felt like this woman was saying, I kept replaying the tape of the story, and somehow this really clicked. And she said, Pat Loader is the woman's name. It really clicked with Pat to sort of hear the stories of other people, and she suddenly thought, this is somebody who understands. This is what's going on with me. And it was able, through that group, she was able to really open up and really talk about her experiences. And eventually she found it to be a very helpful support for her. And it came to a time in her life where she realized at one point, many years later, that she didn't think about her. She realized one day, I hadn't thought about my children for most of the day. And it was just this amazing thing,
wow.
because for so many years, she thought about them all the time.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. BetterHelp recently surveyed over 16,000 people and found that while 75% of people believe it's wise to seek support, only 27% of Americans are in therapy, and people stay silent to avoid being judged. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching you with the right therapist. Because we're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/stopthestigma for their first ever State of Stigma report, the latest in mental health research.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, what was the last part that you said?
She ultimately became the executive director of the program. That's just neither here nor there, but it's kind of an interesting little piece of the story.
Well, so there's so many great points to your book, and one of them I think that you say is that that we're all gonna eventually face some kind of trauma. Like, it's sort of inevitable that life is both yin and yang, and it's sort of inevitable. And so it's not only does that make life beautiful, but it's also, how do you respond to trauma when it knocks on your door? And I'm also reminded of was he a priest, or I forget? He was an activist in South Africa. Yeah, and do you mind sharing that story? Because I think that's really interesting. I just also remember the imagery that he gave for being stuck in trauma. But do you mind sharing that story?
Of course. Father Michael Lapsley is a South African Anglican priest who, in the 1980s, was involved in anti-apartheid activism. He had been pushed out of South Africa just simply because it was clear he felt it was very dangerous. People had threatened his life. He was in exile, and he received some letters or some magazines in the mail. He opened up a magazine, and it turned out to be a parcel bomb, is how he used to put it, or a letter bomb. And that bomb blew off his hands, and he lost hearing in one of his ears and sight in one of his eyes. It was a horrible, traumatic thing. He had to go away to, I think it was to Australia, to recover. And during that recovery period, he realized it was a traumatic, painful recovery period, but it was also emotionally traumatic too. But he realized as his body was healing physically from those physical traumas, that he needed to come up with a way to survive this in a different way than just physically, because he had a choice. He could say, sure, I didn't die here, I survived this, but if he didn't do anything that went beyond that and make anything from this trauma that happened to him, if he didn't try to do something to improve the world through the bad thing that happened to him, he would be, as he described it, as a stone in the river, that he would just be sitting there, the water would be rushing around him. He'd be a subject of history, he called it. An object of history rather than a subject of history, that he wanted to be able to say, I'm going to take this trauma and make something better out of it. And by doing that, he's described himself as a victor versus being a victim. You could have something bad happen to you, but if you don't take the bad thing that happened to you and make something good out of it, you're just a victim. And he doesn't mean it in a blaming way. And then what he did is, he took what happened to him and his experiences, he went back to South Africa and worked with people who had been victims of apartheid or people who had lived through apartheid, and created an organization called the Institute for Healing of Memories, which is a way to help people take those traumas and try to make better lives out of those traumas. Sort of aligned with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa.
Wow, that is such a powerful story, and I just love how I know that you talk about this in the section on chronic illness, which I'd love to talk about after our little break here, because I know there are a lot of people listening who do have a chronic illness, but it's also in the resources you talk about how you can turn it into something, take a trauma and turn it into, like, it's almost like, I don't know if gift is the right word, but you can turn it into something else so that you're not, again, stuck like a stone in the river, and like the river's just passing you by. Like, you can begin to move again, and whatever your life looks like afterwards is part of it is changing your experience of what occurred, and maybe helping other people, or just living in a different mindset, or such a powerful story. I was really again, one of the other powerful stories. You have a lot of great stories in this book, and I'd love to go a little, just kind of give people an overview. But first, let's take a really quick break. And when we come back, if we could specifically talk about how to survive a chronic illness, again, just for a lot of our audience who might be listening who specifically are tuning in for that. And then also I will again mention Think Peace Publishing, who actually does, they are health advocates. It's a publishing company, and they do many interviews and books on, this very subject, resiliency stories, health advocacy. And so we'll be right back. You're listening to The Wellness Coach on Blog Talk Radio. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Wellness Coach on Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Edie Summers, and my very special guest today is Andy Steiner. She is the author of the new book, How to Survive: The Extraordinary Resilience of Ordinary People. The book is available on Amazon, and we'll talk about that just a little bit later, how you can get the book. Just to recap of who Andy is, and also the publisher of this book, Think Peace Publishing. It's a pretty cool publishing company because they specialize in these types of stories, so these types of books. So Andy Steiner is an award-winning journalist, editor, and freelance writer. And again, as I mentioned, her articles have appeared in many national and regional publications. And her most recent book project is How to Survive: The Extraordinary Resilience of Ordinary People, which was published this January 2015 by Think Peace Publishing. Let's talk about Think Peace Publishing really quickly. So Think Peace Publishing is, maybe you can help us with this, Andy. I've met Adam briefly. He did contact me. And so I know that Think Peace Publishing does health advocacy and resiliency stories. Could you tell us a little bit more about Think Peace Publishing? And then I know that we were going to talk about specifically how do you survive a chronic illness, because I think there are, again, a lot of people feel isolated when they have a chronic condition, and I know that isn't that one of the goals of Think Peace Publishing is to help people connect more?
Yes, well, Think Peace Publishing is a boutique press, though I've heard. I was just at an event with the publisher. Adam Wahlberg is the publisher of Think and the founder of Think Peace Publishing. He described it as a boutique. He described it as a boutique press, and someone said really it's more of a advocacy press. I mean, it is a little bit of both. It's a small publisher. He really focuses on what he wants to do is focus on books and music that focus on resiliency and hope. People dealing with health crises, emotional crises, mental health issues, and coming up with ways to sort of turn those issues around, just like I'm talking about with Michael Lapsley, just really trying to make change in the world and make the world a better place. It's a very socially aware publishing company.
That's so wonderful. And then I was wondering if you could share with us specifically one of your chapters is How to Survive a Chronic Illness. So it's so funny, I just flipped to this page, survival tips for the chronically ill from people who've been there.
Yeah.
But I was first wondering, I'll read just a few of these since I have this right in front of me, but first I was wondering if you could share maybe one or two stories that if you can remember from this section.
Sure. Well, this chapter really focuses on two people, unlike some of my other chapters which have talked to more than two people, but really talk about two people. Both of these people, and it's coincident. I mean, it's not intentional or not necessarily saying this is the only kind of chronic illness a person can have, but these are two people whose major chronic illness is the fact that they have diabetes, and so, but that's just part of the story. One woman is a woman named Dee who had gestational diabetes, which caused a lot of issues for her. She had for a long time, and very severely diabetic, which she ultimately became a double transplant patient. She had her pancreas and her pancreas and her liver transplanted, or no, her kidney pancreas transplant.
Kidneys. And it
was a long time ago, an unusual kind of transplant to have at the time. But she's successfully lived with those transplants for a long time. But it does create chronic illness in other ways. She's no longer diabetic, but now she has a lot of other related issues because of anti-rejection medications and different things that are part of living with transplants for a long time. She's a wonderful person. Her face, for her, is really key to how she really lives with a lot of the challenges that she faces. And then another person who is she's a well-known diabetes, I guess, activist, but she doesn't really probably like that at all, actually, but she's a blogger. Her name is Carrie Sparling, and she has a blog called 6 Until Me, and she writes a lot about living with type 1 diabetes. She's had since she was 6 years old. And she's very active in diabetes community. People know her really well. And she talks a lot about how she lived with it. She's still a young woman, and she has a young child, how she dealt with pregnancy and diabetes, how she deals with relationships, friendships, activism, that kind of thing.
So wonderful. And yes,
different people have different stories. Yeah.
Different people have different stories? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I was just going to say the different people's approaches are different, too. Carrie, is relentlessly optimistic, but also kind of sly and sassy. Dee, on the other hand, is incredibly optimistic, also so full of faith and so, joyful, and talks a lot about how she, and prayerful in a way that's different than other people. Everyone has a different approach to living with their chronic illness.
I love that. And I think that is true. Everyone's story is different, and so you have to kind of find what resonates for you and what's going to work for you in terms of moving from, again, feeling like you're a victim of your situation to feeling like you're a survivor, essentially. So here are some survival tips for the chronically ill from people who've been there. This is directly from your book. So live for each day. This is what Dee says. Don't dwell on the past or worry about the future. It doesn't make sense for me to live my life fretting over what happened yesterday or what could happen to my health tomorrow. She says, all I have is right now, and every day is a bright new opportunity. And then there's a bunch more in here. There's another one, though, that, here we go. The very last one I really liked. Try looking at your chronic illness as a source of wisdom and insight rather than a burden. This is a quote by psychologist Joe Nelson. This is a tough accomplishment, he says, but it is one that he feels is worth the effort for everyone. For many people, this attitude shift requires a major adjustment, but it's also a true eye-opener and life enhancer. And realizing the wisdom that comes from chronic illness opens a person up for greater resiliency.
That's true. Yeah,
I love that quote.
He quoted from a poem, "The Guest House" by Rumi, which really talks about how you really need to. You need to welcome in each new challenge in your life and see what you can learn from it. It's really amazing, to think about that. It's not easy. I mean, it's one thing to say it and then how to live your life that way when you're dealing with a lot of the problems that come with chronic illness. But I think that, both Carrie and Dee, in their own way, do that, find ways to sort of welcome that into their lives.
Absolutely. And I know that I've faced chronic illness myself, and I can absolutely attest to the fact that you can become resilient from it, and you can find the kind of the hidden gifts in it. And it's made me a lot more insightful. It's made me a lot more compassionate. Some really valuable... Yep. Yeah, really valuable life skills. I mean, there's really nothing much greater than like kindness or compassion if you think about it. And being able to hold other people's perspective, like it gives you a lot more patience, I think. And what did you say? What were you saying, Edie?
I said patience as well. That's funny. I was just saying I think patience.
Patience. There we go. It's really true. And then before we let people know a little bit more about where they can buy your book, Andy, what are one or two takeaways that you can think of, or even one that you really just want to make sure that people get?
From
this book? Yes.
Okay. I hope that what people can get from my book is not a sense, though, when I start describing all these different scenarios, and I think people will feel like, this is so depressing. Why would I want to read this book? But the truth is, what I think that you can get from my book is a lot of hope, because I really do believe that everyone has something. We are not immune to these traumas. But if we realize that that's the case, and we start opening our eyes and looking around ourselves and seeing that there's everyone. This is part of humanity. I think it gives us the strength to realize that we can go through those things, that we can have the capacity for resilience and keep moving on. And that is part of life and part of being human and alive. And embracing that as a reality is probably the best way to go. So I think that's probably the best takeaway to get from it. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I just want to recap that for people so it really sinks in is realizing that you do have the capacity to be resilient, and hopefully this will give you hope. So again, you can feel like you can move beyond that place where the trauma or the chronic illness or the loss of a loved one or anything else, any other event that has occurred in your life, you feel like you have the strength to move on from that place and get back into the kind of the moving river of life, so to speak. Again, it's kind of like there's a quote from that in your book. And so I just want to make sure that people know all the different chapters that are in your book. First of all, so it's called How to Survive the Extraordinary Resilience of Ordinary People by Edie Steiner. So your last name is spelled Steiner, for anyone who's listening. We get a lot of people listening on their phones and maybe don't see the show page. So, and then also, before we talk a little bit about the book, what is your web address? Let's just make sure people know where to go to find you as well.
Okay, well, my website is andysteiner.com, ANDYSTEINER.com. My publisher's website is Think Peace Publishing, so that's Think Peace, ThinkPiece.com, ThinkPeacePublishing.com.
ThinkPeacePublishing.com. And then where can people find your book?
My book
it's
is
on
Amazon.
Amazon.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's also available. It's available as a regular, what do you want to call it? A book you could have, a hard copy book. You can also buy my book for Kindle too, and
Perfect.
iTunes too. So.
Oh, wonderful. It's on iTunes. Okay, so great. So it's iTunes, Kindle, and paperback. And then I'm just here on Amazon right now. And so some of the different chapters you talk about: death of a spouse, loss of a child, distress of bankruptcy, trauma of a heart attack.
There are other things besides those kind of things. Yeah, exactly.
So this really covers. I mean, you cover if anyone's gone through any kind of trauma. I feel like you cover them in your book, and again, you give resources in your book, which is really fantastic. So it's really comprehensive. And Andy, I can't thank you enough for being here today. Is there anything else that you would like to add or make sure that people know about? Or do you have any book signings coming up, or any other things from the book that you really want to make sure people know about, or? Anything?
Well, there's a couple things. I just want to say that, you just started talking about the different chapters, and it's important to say that what's trauma to one person may seem kind of like not a big deal, but can really feel like a big deal to someone else. I talk about how to survive the loss of a job, right? So or unemployment, and that can be really actually very traumatic. It can really be hard. Everyone has to go through what that means. That could be a loss of an identity to lose your job. A person could lose a spouse. That could be really hard, or living with a chronic illness. But then you could also lose your house to foreclosure. That can also be very traumatic. So there's no official scale that shows this thing is more traumatic or this thing is more worthy of sadness than another, right? That all of these things are something that we have the ability to get through. So that's something I wanted to say. As far as readings, I'm doing a lot of readings and events, but I'm based in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. So right now my readings have been Minnesota and Wisconsin, but I may be, who knows, maybe doing others. I'll be going I'm doing a reading on Friday. Yeah, so I'm all over. So
that is so great. Yeah, that's so great, and you're welcome back anytime. And I just thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I was trying to find. Here we go. Here's one more quote from the. This is from the opening part of your book here. I don't know if this is you or the person that you're quoting, but I just it says here we are all just one step away from having the rug pulled out from under our feet. Our lives, our happiness, our sense of well-being is really that fragile. The realization can be frightening. But if you take a slow, steady breath and parse it down, maybe understanding that everyone on this earth is a fragile being, this veil that divides trauma and everyday happiness is thin and permeable, could also provide you with a curious sense of freedom and humanity. And I really love that, especially the ending. I think it's almost like to be human again is to experience everything, and it's when we allow ourselves to experience everything and don't judge or get stuck when something happens, and realize that we can bounce back from it. We may not be the same person afterwards, but we can still find a new normal. And just a really what an inspirational book. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for writing this and compiling all these stories and interviewing people.
Thanks so much for inviting me on. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks, Andy. I did as well. And thanks again for being here. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi. Bye, everyone. You've been listening to The Wellness Coach on Blog Talk Radio. I hope you have a great rest of your day as well. And tune back in soon. I'm actually going to be interviewing another think piece publishing author coming up here soon. So let me see if I can pull her up. I'm going to be interviewing, let me just see really quickly here. I believe she's an author on dog medicine. Let me see if I can pull it up. Well, anyway, I can't see it right now, but it's going to be coming up soon. Let me see if I can get back to the front here. I'm going to be interviewing an author. Well, I'll have to see. I can't seem to pull it up right now. But thank you so much for tuning in. And do tune in again because I'll be interviewing. I just absolutely love interviewing authors. And I'm going to be, I'm always looking for people to interview. I love authors, and also if you're a health or wellness or fitness expert, I would love to interview as well. And let's get you more exposure. And just thanks so much for tuning in. And I really hope that you do take the time to tune in. And what happens when you do, there's a whole world. And also thanks everyone for listening who did specifically tune in, who is going through some type of trauma or is looking to recover. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and I really encourage you to go get this book, How to Survive the Extraordinary Resilience of Ordinary People. It's a really great book, and again, there are a ton of resources in it, and there is, again, what Andy was saying, please don't ever give up hope. I just remember my dad said this to me. Actually, my dad passed away in 2008 from esophageal cancer. And one of the last things he said to me, the last conversation I ever had with him, he said to me, don't ever lose the light from your eyes. Too many people give up in this world. And what a beautiful piece of advice. From someone who was on their deathbed. He knew what's really important, so I encourage that for you as well. Don't ever lose the light from your eyes. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.